you, Kevin. Calling this special meeting to order on this July 23rd, 2024. Thank you for coming this evening. If you would, roll call. Capari.
Here.
David Harwood.
Here.
Melissa Pickett.
Here.
Doug Matheson.
Here.
Pete Greeny. Here. Okay, all are in attendance. If you would, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, seeing this is a special meeting, there is no regular agenda. Well, we can adopt the agenda, but there's no, as such, regular agenda because this is a special meeting. So do I have a motion to accept the agenda as written? Do I have a second? David? Oh,
Pete.
Pete, thank you, Pete.
Aye.
Kat?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Doug? And Pete. Okay. All right. Shane Fox is going to do a quick update on our water issue.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It seems a little bit like good timing or bad timing, I'm not sure, but we just received about 2 inches of rain in town. So this was put together this morning. And I've got a couple updates here, but we are currently under our Stage 1 water restrictions. Chapter 14, 88, proclamation of a water shortage in town. We discussed back on July 9th, and we enacted it on July the 10th. I thought tonight was a good time to give an update because we're still under Stage 1 and some reasoning on why we're under Stage 1. Before we get into our special meeting topic, Stage 1, as we recall talking about on July 9th, is again just asking or encouraging our folks to be mindful of utilizing water for things like flowers, which are maybe not needed in the past week, or washing cars, etc. So again, not any mandates of any sorts, just asking folks to be mindful of not wasting water. As you know, June was a very dry month. We had less than an inch of rain in the town of Blowing Rock, therefore leading to the shortage that we discussed back on July the 9th. As of this morning, the reservoir is down about 4 feet. So we were down as much as 6.5 feet. So that's a good sign. Just a few minutes ago, I ran out there and we're down about 3.5. So that's good and encouraging. And I think we'll have some more spill over later tonight into the morning that should hopefully reduce that number down. So the rain has been great. Today's rain is perfect because it essentially comes from Flat Top in that area. We talked on the 9th. That's where we need it because that's where our water source originates on the Blue Ridge Parkway. Production's down about currently around 700,000 gallons a day. That was up to 900,000 gallons 2 weeks ago. So our peak around July 4th, the week after July 4th, we've seen that come back down. Again, these are good signs. Of course, it's our busiest time of year between now and October, so we're being mindful of the fact that we do need to receive additional rain to get the pond back up closer to being a full pond, if not a full pond. What's taken place since July 9th has been conversations with the town of Boone. As you know, we do have an interconnect with the town of Boone. On their agenda for tomorrow night's council meeting are two things. One, discussion of the testing of that interconnect. We do plan on working with McGill over the next couple weeks to work through another test to make sure things are operational. It's been about 2 years since we tested it. All things were working 2 years ago. We expect things to be in place now and all working just as a backup plan if we were to go into more drought restrictions. The interconnect would be there. Secondly, working with the town of Boone also within the rate structure. And we've discussed that at the July 9th meeting, and we've shared some rates back and forth where neither party is going to make money or lose money on it, essentially. Something that has taken place and that will take place this coming Friday, we've worked with McGill, our town engineer, to put divers down at the reservoir, something that's not taken place in a number of years, to check not only the levels at the intake, but the intakes themselves, the valves, water testing that will go on, quality, etc. Again, things that would be good to have, even if we have a full pond tomorrow, which would be fantastic. We're still going forward with some of these testings and some of the maneuvers that we put into place to be able to have more of an insight for it. So as of right now, we're still in Stage 1. We're not quite ready to lift it until we get a little bit further. Here are some updated pictures. On the left was on the 9th. On the right was this morning. You can see we've gained a little bit, but not a lot. I mean, it's pretty much the same. There's our marker. It's hard to see. The full pond's right above that red, about halfway up the white, about 6 inches up the white. So the red's a foot, the white's a foot, the red's a foot. Therefore, if you look at it, we were down 4 feet this morning. And so now we're back up to the very bottom of that red, which is about 6 inches up. So again, just wanted to give an update. You had a big crowd tonight. You had a lot of folks watching. We are still in stage 1, even with the amount of rain we've had in the last 7 to 10 days, primarily because we received almost no rain for about 6 weeks. And we really got behind, especially during the busiest time of the year. So I just wanted to provide that update and answer any questions you might have with regards to stage 1 water restrictions. Optimistic with the rain we're having, we'll hopefully come out of it soon, but not quite ready to lift it yet.
What would be the primary factors of us moving to stage 2?
So stage 2 is, by ordinance, is 10 feet down. That being said, a lot is going to determine what we find out Friday. So it's been a number of years since we've had divers go down and inspect the valves. So theoretically, we have valves at 5, 10, and 15 feet. Right now, we're there right at 5, and so we should have another 10 feet. Sediment, things of that nature, we're going to be able to find out on Friday and have some more input. I think for this town to get to stage 2 would be around the time at which we would probably discuss with the town of Boone purchasing water around that same time frame. The reservoir has been tremendous over the years, great water source, but we want to be mindful not to get too far before we start discussion. And that's the primary reason for discussion with the town of Boone, and the reason it's on their agenda tomorrow night is to make sure that we know that everything's working, everything's ready, and that we've got understanding between both parties if we were to have to flip it on, or vice versa, if they were to get in a situation they'd have to.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good.
Any questions? Thank you.
You want to go ahead and stay there?
I can.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, citizens, family members, this has been a very contentious issue. As a citizen, as a mayor, right here, I ask that please be respectful of those speaking. Please be respectful of the council. The council will be respectful as well. We understand that if this decision is, if it's made tonight, is not made in a manner that is conducive to individuals that are against it, they can file suit. Yes, they can. That's their right to do so. And so be it. That's okay. But I ask in this building that we show everybody respect. And if you have something you want to say or like to say, get with Hillary and come up with a podium. And or now, if you have a conversation you want to have with your friends, step outside. You don't mind. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Shane, it's yours.
Mayor and Town Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. As I start the presentation, I'm going to work my way that direction to be able to see the board, because there's a number of things I'd like to point out tonight. And again, we've talked about this. Hopefully soon we can have the equipment in here and kind of change the layout of this room so we're not presenting things behind us. It's a little bit difficult. But that being said, I'm going to walk over here if that's okay, and I'll utilize this mic to be able to look at the board and have a conversation. So we are here tonight to discuss our conditional zoning 2024-01, asking to go from R15 to conditional zoning R15. Outline up tonight, we'll start with why are we here, a little background on the Green Hill site, with some maps and overviews with some pictures. Discussion of the town of Blowing Rock communications as they currently stand and what we're proposing, the utilization of VHF technology, two-way radios, and then why the need and what has changed and why we're here to request the conditional zoning from R15 to conditional zoning 15. And then a little bit about what this isn't, and then closing as well, just a few points I'd like to make. So that being said, we'll start with why are we here. We're here because we're asking for consideration of conditional zoning for the town to erect an 80-foot utility pole on the town-owned property, otherwise known as the Green Hill Water Tank Site on Green Hill Circle. The 80-foot utility pole would replace the current 57-foot utility pole on site and will be utilized for town internal communication purposes. This is our fire, police, and public works. This is our central services, our public safety services. This is not for outside agencies. It never has been. It's only for internal agencies, internal use. No cellular companies and zero changes to the current system are being proposed tonight. Again, the reason we're here is because of the height. It goes beyond what our current ordinance has in it. That's why we're asking for consideration of conditional zoning. Why conditional zoning? If you were to watch the planning board and some of the discussion that took place on SUP, quasi-judicial versus conditional zoning, we're asking, and we asked to move forward with conditional zoning versus SUP to simply allow for a more public process, to gain more transparency and dialogue with the public. The reason we're here tonight, the reason the majority of these folks are signing up is because they can. This is for everyone in the public to be able to speak. SUP process is quasi-judicial. You understand, and you've all sat through those before. It's very limited in who can speak, and what they can speak towards, or what claims may be made within that. It's also limited in our ability to have dialogue, with each other and the community as a whole. Again, knowing this is a contentious issue, conditional zoning is the option that gives us the most public involvement and does allow for a true open process to take place. And that's why we're here tonight. So a little background on the Green Hill site. Overall, we have utilized the current site in which the water tank is on since about 1976. So I put here 50 years, right? 48 years. That being said, the overall site up there has been utilized for town purposes, water, etc., for 90 years, give or take. It's been a long time that we've utilized Green Hill for town purposes. It's also home to our 3 million gallon water tank. So if you've been up there and you've walked it, it's a large structure, 6 times larger than what our clear well is out here on 321. We're currently utilizing, I've got some pictures to show you in just a few moments, a 57-foot utility pole for our VHF radio system. That VHF system is our primary communication, only communication for the most part, of our police, fire, and public works radios outside of their cell phones. This is their inner communication. This is how they operate with each other internally, with peer-to-peer, etc. We've done this up there for about 50 years, give or take. Why is this location not only for the water tower, but for communications? It's the highest point in the town limits. It's right at 3,925 feet. We've been up there utilizing that site for about 90 years for some purpose. Water primarily, and then in communications. Again, we'll talk a little bit about the VHF system, but if you can imagine, the highest point in town, everything comes down similar to the water system. It's all gravity fed. It all comes downhill. Same with the radio systems. It goes up to a point, comes back down to a point. And we'll show a diagram in just a few moments, and maybe helps illustrate that a little bit more. It's hard to see here a little bit, but I wanted to put up, this is a map or survey of our water tank right here. Large circle in the middle, 3 million gallons. This is Green Hill Circle that kind of goes around this direction. Over here is Doswell property and Renner. You kind of know where you are here. We've got a road that comes in through Mr. Doswell's property, and we have an old shed here that we'll see in a few moments in the pictures. We have our new concrete building sitting right here, and our proposed site for our towers about right there. I'm not shaking that thing, just doesn't do that. So right there about where that dot is, and we'll show you in just a few moments kind of on some pictures of where we're proposing to put this new 80-foot pole. Here's an overview map from our GIS system with some distances to the nearest point of each structure from where the pole would be located. And again, that's that dot right there is what we're talking about, where the potential pole or the proposal is going to go. And then 107 feet down, here's Mr. Doswell's property, 164 to the Renters, and across the streets, more than 150 to 200 range of what we're looking at. And again, that's to the closest point of the property, or closest point to the structure on each one of those properties. Here's the current picture of Green Hill. This was taken just a couple weeks ago. Bottom left-hand corner is our old dilapidated building that's fallen down. Here's our new concrete building that we've already sat with our racks and hopefully soon our new equipment in there. We do have 2 poles here. This is the pole that's operating our VHF system. This is our pole, and it looks taller than this. I'll flip it in a minute. You'll see it. This is the pole that's operating current radio reads and that type of thing for our meter system. There you can see the flip. This is the 57-foot pole with the antenna on top, the whip on top, that's being utilized for our VHF radio system. This is the back side of the concrete building. The new one, this is the old kind of dilapidated building down in the right-hand corner. So a little bit of background. I think it's important to put in a little bit of information to help understand why we utilize the VHF technology and what that looks like. So it is for our town police, fire, and our public works. It is for internal communications. It's peer-to-peer, and it's through dispatch. So it's who they utilize. It's what they utilize on the side of 321 when they're using their chest radios or their handheld radios to call back into dispatch for tag numbers and information. It's what they use for peer-to-peer to each other with the police, fire, and public works. And so this is our only internal communication system that we have. It is not for external use. So this is only for the town of Little Rock to utilize for these purposes. VHF stands for very high frequency. That being said, it's not actually that high when it's compared to other things. VHF, from a megahertz standpoint, the radio frequency that's being sent out, is between 30 and 300. Ours is between 150 and 160. If you look at UHF, which is ultra high frequency, that's about 300 to 1 gig. Fiber that was talked about here a number of years ago is around 800 megahertz, and cell phones are give or take 900. So it's called very high frequency, but it's actually very low frequency in comparison to these things. VHF has served the town in the current capacity, again, for about 50 years in the current, served the town for about 50 years currently. You know, the way that the VHF system works, and I've got a diagram to show you in just a few moments, is that the radio waves propagate by line of sight, so they can be blocked. So the higher you go, the better ability you have to be able to get that line to the radios or to the receiver or to the dispatch or to the individual that you're trying to call on. You know, the higher the antenna, the better that it is, essentially. So here's a diagram that is simple, and I think it kind of puts into place something that you can kind of imagine is that the higher you go here and the less obstructions you have down below, the better your signals are going to be. So if you have trees, that's not necessarily going to block the signal, it's going to weaken the signal. So VHF technology is different, maybe than even your cell phone or digital technology. Digital has a way of working until it doesn't. VHF kind of wanes, the signal gets weaker. And so what we've noticed is that we've been able to see some weakening of those signals over the years. So things like tree canopies, that type of thing, which we'll talk about in a few moments, can weaken the signal. Doesn't necessarily block them. Hills can block them, major things can block them. So we're trying to get to the highest point in town. We're trying to get above our other areas that we have that are topography issues or challenges within the town. So why the need? What has changed? Why are we here? Again, we've seen kind of those slow declining things that have been taking place with signal strengths. We know things like in the wintertime, quite honestly, our signals are better than in the summertime because we have leaves on the trees in the summertime. And those things do have water in the leaves, and they absorb and they slow down the signal strength. These are things that we know because we've been utilizing it for a long time, and we've seen some of these declining things that are in place. We have invested some monies into some new technology, boosters that will be in the house and the cement building very soon. So we have put some money already to approve that as part of the budget in 23-24. We discussed it starting back in retreat back in early 2023, if you remember that. So, the tree canopy around the current site has continued to grow, and I've got some pictures there. That's a good thing. Part of what we're trying to do is be good neighbors and allow the canopy around the current site, around the 3 million gallon water tank, to grow up to be able to camouflage. And I think we've done a pretty good job. A lot of folks drive up there and drive around, especially this time of year. You never know that the water tank's there unless you're really looking for it. Wintertime, it's a little different. You can see, obviously, we've got leaves that fall off the trees. But we've allowed that canopy to grow up around the water tank to be able to camouflage that 3 million gallon structure that you just can't miss if you don't have those trees in place for that. That being said, we've also kind of hindered ourselves at the same time because as those trees in the canopy continue to grow, it's now starting to impede with the height of our current pole and our antenna that's up there. So we've asked for consideration tonight to go from 57 feet to 80 feet, 23 feet higher, to be able to get above some of those trees that are out there. Here are some pictures just from a couple weeks ago of this pole. You can kind of see the tree line, and the fact our pole is a little bit higher than most of these trees, but we are seeing some larger trees that are much larger than what we have right here. And on the backside, you'll see trees that are very similar. So if you've had a chance to go up there and walk around, not only on our property, but on neighboring properties as well, we've got some pretty high trees that are starting to get to that 60, 65 foot mark. And so they're starting to impede with some of the signals that are out there. That's why we're here tonight asking for consideration. So again, the ask, we're asking for conditional rezoning if approved. If so, we will then move forward with procuring a 100-foot galvanized pole. Right now it's through Rutherford EMC. Then we would agree to contract with Blue Ridge Electric to put the pole in the ground. Pole would be 80 foot above grade. So whether that's 20 foot in the ground or whether they cut a portion of it off, that's Blue Ridge Electric to work with on installing that pole. This is what they do. This is what they do every day. They're the experts in putting these things in. We're discussing a utility pole. And that's something that I want to make sure that I clarify. And I've got a picture here. This is an example in the stockyard that we're referring to of what this pole can look like. This pole is now galvanized. It can be painted, it can be colored, it can be changed to something that can be more camouflaged. But this is the pole in which we're speaking. This is an 80-foot galvanized pole. This is something that you see quite common on, in neighborhoods on Route 21, et cetera, that type of thing, being utilized for utility purposes. So this is a picture of the pole. I think it's important, as the mayor mentioned earlier, a lot of things have been said. This is very contentious. I want to just point out a few things that what this isn't. This isn't for any other purposes. This is for internal communication purposes only, just like we've been using it. What we're not asking for is permission for cellular companies. Zero, period. We are not. House Bill 310 has been brought up. We believe, council believes, that that's not applicable to this site for several reasons. One, the right of way. Two, the single family designation that's up there that we're not changing. And the fact that this pole is not for what we determined or what we believe the general statutes say are public utilities. This is for internal purposes. This is not for public use. This is just for the town of Blowing Rock to use. If you change conditional zoning tonight, I think you know this, but it doesn't change anything about how the property is being used other than allowing for us to install an 80-foot pole. Does it change anything about the neighboring properties? Does it change to allow for short-term rentals or anything? It only changes the ability for us to move from the 57-foot pole to the 80-foot pole. Does not change anything about the zoning of the properties around us. We put here the poles not follow residences. We have confidence that the pole is going to be installed properly. This is what Blue Ridge does. We feel confident that they're going to install it properly. We've not had issues with utility poles falling in town at any point. So we feel pretty confident of that. And we've also provided some of the distances in one of the previous slides, and I'll be glad to go back to it if additional questions may come of how far we are to the nearest corner of each one of those structures that we have. Again, what this is, this has always been about one thing and one thing only. It's improving public safety communication. That's all that it has ever been. This has been the most open, transparent process that we could have chosen for this request. That's why we picked conditional zoning, not SUP. Most places, I believe, would have gone a different route and have made different decisions on what we're doing. We're trying to make this as open, and we try to be as responsive to all the requests and all the questions that we can to be able to get to this point tonight to be able to have this open process. So, in closing, the town of Blowing Rock's VHF radios are the lifeline of the officers, the firefighters, and public works employees for the town of Blowing Rock. We consider our radio communication mission critical. Communication systems mission critical operates if operations cannot continue without it. In the commercial world, operations stop, business is lost, and public safety, as it is in the town, if operations stop or if they're not operable, it means that someone could get injured or worse. The town has experienced radio communications failures in the past, and it's resulted in loss of life already. It's been a number of years ago, but we've had experience. We've experienced other things since then. So that being said, just for a moment, I'd like to ask Chief Kirk to come up and speak towards the radio system and what not having operable or a operational system could be related to.
Good evening, everybody. I spoke during the plan board. I spoke on this topic also at the winter retreat. Just like Mr. Fox has said, this is mission critical. I'm wearing what a patrol officer wears here in Blowing Rock. It's about 30 to 35 pounds of equipment. And we do programs for the kids all the time, and I ask, what's the most important thing to wear? And all the kids are like, gun. That's one piece. The most important thing, though, is radio. This radio is your lifeline. Just like Mr. Fox said, it is mission critical. And the loss of life, I told this story during the plan board meeting. I think it's still relevant today, and I'll tell you guys again. So Chief Green, back in 1963, it was a much more seasonal town than what Blowing Rock is now. Lots of empty houses during the wintertime. There was a string of breaking and enterings that were occurring, and Chief Green just happened to come upon a pink Pontiac pulling out about 2 o'clock in the morning. So he called out on the radio to Watauga saying that he was initiating a chase with this vehicle. Short chase ensues. They go down 321 southbound over Caldwell County line. The radio call that he made to Watauga, it went unanswered. Nobody heard that he was out with the vehicle. Nobody heard that he started a chase. So what happens, what unfolds, there was one male in the vehicle, 2 males in the vehicles, and 2 females in the vehicle. Chief Green approaches the vehicle. He ends up getting shot twice. He gets stabbed multiple times. He calls out on the radio after calling back to his patrol car. They found him slumped over. Watauga didn't hear it again. The radio call went unanswered. Luckily, well, unfortunately, the people that did hear the radio call was in Salisbury, and it was the Highway Patrol. They were able to make a phone call up to Watauga to have them send an officer out to see if Chief Green was okay. Unfortunately, Chief Green passed away from his injuries. As chief now, what concerns me and what makes me lose sleep at night is if a situation like this was to happen again. Because the officer that came in to relieve Chief Green that morning, Officer Wood, was quoted as saying, well, our radios don't work too well down there. And unfortunately, that statement was made in 1963. I've worked for the town of Blowing Rock since 2019. I've made that exact same statement. And just to, there's multiple calls that I could bring up to where I've had a personal radio failure. And talking about the line of sight, just to drive that home, we had a call out down on Glen Burnie Trail. And if anybody's been on Glen Burnie Trail in this room, it is steep and it goes downhill. So this man went down, he had a heart attack, and luckily he couldn't make a phone call, but someone coming up the trail could. They got back to the parking lot, they called the PD, fire was dispatched, fire went in on the Globe side of the trail, which is all uphill. My officers went down the front side by the parking lot. We were able to find them first. We got him stabilized. Fire department was coming up. We were trying to radio out. There's nothing you can do down there. And so this radio right here is a dual band radio. So we have VHF and we have Viper capabilities. First we tried VHF. It's like, try to talk on it and somebody going the entire time. So nothing, no transmission was going out at all. I had my officer stand on a rock that was probably about 3 feet tall off the trail, holding his radio up like this. Nothing. Switched over to Viper. When you switch to Viper, it's all digital. So it just goes, beep. Can't speak, can't do anything. So about 3 minutes later, fire department's coming up the trail. We get him. We get him stabilized, get him on the carry out, and we're starting to carry him out. We have another medical call on the same trail. While we're carrying him out, there was somebody else that had a heart attack. So it's a matter of trying to send an officer up the trail so you can get some radio traffic out to bring more personnel down. That's one example. There was another example. I was on a medical call myself, CPR in progress. I was directly behind Green Park Inn on the 3rd floor of a building, inside working on this gentleman, doing CPR. I had another officer coming. He was running code from the other side of town. And luckily he got there so I could hear medics. I could hear medics talking on my radio. They were looking for which unit it was to try to go in and help me. Couldn't get out. I was trying to radio, couldn't get no signal out, no transmissions whatsoever. So my officer had to go outside, flag the medics down, call on the radio, got their attention, and we got some help up there. But every officer that works in this department could come up here and tell you a story about the radio not working, doesn't work too good. That statement was made in 1963. It is still relevant to this day. So thank you guys for letting me speak today. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Still in closing, in summary, 2 weeks ago almost now, planning board process was successful for this application. And planning board approved a vote 5-3 to move forward, allow the town to move forward tonight, recommendations tonight, with the poll subject to a study being performed. A study can be performed. It has not been today with the telecommunications firm. That's something that we can do. That's for discussion as well tonight. So the ask again is that for you to consider additional zoning, rezoning to allow for an 8-foot pole to be erected to replace the current 27-foot pole that's being utilized for internal communication purposes for the town, police, fire, and public works department. town's first and most important obligation to the citizens and stakeholders is to provide emergency services to those in need, as you heard from Chief Kirk. We have an obligation, we'll continue to uphold that obligation. Simply put, this has always been about one thing, it's improving public safety. It's never been about anything else. So therefore, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have with regards to the presentation or during or after the public hearing.
Counsel?
Could you tell me, is digital or 800 megahertz radio better? How much better than what we already have?
Better, different. So is the best way to put it. So Viper or digital, which is Chief Kirk mentioned a few moments ago, that was discussed about 10 years ago, is a higher megahertz, has a much higher frequency. That being said, depending on the network, the fullness of the network that's being put in, VHF technology can be better. From what was mentioned earlier about the call out on Glen Burnie, with digital, if you don't have a great network, if you're in an area with low signal, you have really no signal. It goes from, it's like a cell phone. You can be on the phone talking to someone and it drops. That's a similarity to what a digital system can be. VHF will just wane. It starts getting less than. And so that's something that, the VHF system does allow, and that's primarily why we've kept it as long as we have. Back 10 years ago when the discussion was about Viper, we would have welcomed Viper in from a technology standpoint. But having these dual band radios to be able to have both is something that is really important with the topography that we have here. So, having signal strength and having full signal strength with digital is much more important than on VHF. So having a VHF system that's weaker, so to speak, or it's lessened by trees, still allows for communications maybe to get out. It's just lessened, or it's muffled, so to speak. So there's a difference there. Digital, absolutely, if you could wave the wand and pick digital or VH or Viper, that's the way to go. Absolutely. I mean, that's what we would like to have, a full network across the town that would look like something like that. Does that answer the question?
What would be options moving forward to upgrade our communication systems? And any idea what cost and how long?
Upgrading to digital,
Would it be digital?
to Viper, something.
Okay.
Again, we would need to consult, with an expert to come in and give us quotes on a full network of what that network would cost. It's expensive. I mean, that's something that I think does need to be mentioned. The radios that were mentioned with the dual bands, not every police officer and not every, one of our folks that I mentioned up here has a dual band radio right now. That's something that you would have to purchase. And radios alone are $8,000 to $10,000 a piece. And we have probably 75 or 80 radios. So depending on the number of radios, and it would be the majority of them, I would say at least $500,000 worth of radios before you even got into the networking cost. And so digital, absolutely, wave the wand, but it's seven figures. It's into the low millions. It's $1 million to $2 million would be my guess, sitting here with radios, with the network equipment that we're talking. And again, that's just knowing what the radio cost, what the digital piece, the infrastructure piece would be. It would be seven figures.
Thank you. You had mentioned a study that the planning board had recommended.
Correct.
Any options on that? I mean,
Certainly can be. Yeah, that's, part of, I think, the discussion tonight is if that's the recommendation. The town has not moved forward at this point. We received the recommendation less than 2 weeks ago. That was part of the discussion for tonight is, whether or not this moves forward, whether or not a study moves forward. But yeah, a telecommunication study is something that the town could obtain, absolutely.
Question. Do you know when those trees were planted?
Ooh, I don't know that answer. The property and the current tank is from 1976. My guess would be that around that time, the majority of them were planted or after, but I would think the majority, and I'll look over here to Mr. Matheson, who was here during that time, that I would imagine the majority of that lot was cleared, if not all that lot was cleared for that tank to be built there.
Because they hired Johnny Lentz and I, we cleared about that whole hill back around then, before a lot of those lots were even sold and houses were built up there.
So fair to say the trees were planted around after
Probably
the tank
around
was
then.
built? Yeah.
And for clarity's sake, the only condition that we're putting on this parcel is an 80-foot pole,
Correct.
nothing else.
Nothing else.
You had mentioned boosters, and I think, again, for clarity's sake, you had mentioned there's a booster in the new concrete building.
The repeaters, so maybe the booster term repeater, so boosting the signal up, repeating the signal and putting it back up. Those will be housed in the new building. So right now we're still operating with the old building. The new building has been placed, the racks have been put in there, the equipment has not been installed yet, but we will have new repeaters, boosters to be able to send the signal up from what we currently have, yes.
Do we have repeaters in other places in town that catch?
We do,
Okay,
police station, public works, and fire stations.
okay.
Yeah, and that's how they receive and send signals back and forth with each other from one base to the mobiles and vice versa. That is our nucleus. So if you were looking at the nucleus of the system, we have an antenna and a pole here and a repeater at the police station, same with fire station, same with public works. But the nucleus of the system, the main repeaters of the system, the main antenna of the system is on Green Hill.
If, so we're currently committed to VHF,
Yes,
and this will improve that system.
yes.
Does an 80-foot pole contribute to a different system? Were we to transition to digital or Viper, would that pole be utilized or would it be unnecessary?
I believe that would be utilized. I mean, the highest point in town is this site. And so for any system, even if it's a digital system, you still have to have a main point that everything operates off of. Even if you have various other locations within the system itself that's repeating off of each other, necessarily, you still have a main site. This site, I believe, would still be used. Even with a new system, it would be.
Thank you.
Certainly.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The story about Chief Green is horrible. It's just very awful. It happened in 1963, and I appreciate you telling us about that. But I'm kind of curious because that was before the utility communications pole was put where it is now. So I'm wondering if anyone knows where the communications pole was at that time, and also when it was moved, wherever it was in 1963, if that greatly improved, and I'm thinking it did, because it was on higher ground.
So the Green Hill site that we're currently located on with the water tank and the utility pole is essentially next door to the former site. So we've had multiple sites on Green Hill. We don't have records that go back beyond this site for communications of what was used. So we can't give you an answer exactly of what was used back in 1963. Again, this being the highest point in town, I think it's fair that either this site or even the Hospital Hill Chestnut site was being utilized for technology. That's the second highest point within town, something like this. And so why this was put up there, after the construction of the new 3 million gallon water tank, again, for the exact same purposes. This is the highest point in town. So if it wasn't there previously, then it was put there, then no doubt it improved it during that time. But I simply don't have information that goes back beyond this current location of where we have it, from the mid-70s.
Good, counsel. Open up the public hearing.
Man, I got one more,
Okay.
please. How much is the extended pole? What is the cost of the extended pole?
The new pole, cost-wise for the pole, about $9,000 plus an additional few $1,000s for installation. So $12,000 to $13,000 would be a full cost for the pole. Plan is to utilize the same whip that we have up there now that's on it. Again, everything down below has already been replaced or has been purchased. We haven't put everything in fully, but the pole itself is about $9,000 for that galvanized pole. If we paint it, obviously a little bit more cost, that type of thing, but and then a few $1,000s for the installation of the pole. So $12,000 to $13,000.
Good. All right, thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
Got a list for me, Hillary? All right, the public hearing is open, and I'll go from the top down. When you come up, if you would, stand at the podium, speak in the mic, and give your name and your address, and then the floor is yours. So, Dan Page.
Could I reserve my right to speak later, perhaps? I don't have anything to say at the moment.
Okay, yes, you could, Dan. Thank you. Let's see. Tom. Oh, hey, Tom. I didn't see you hiding over there. Yeah, just state your address. Well, yeah, no, I have that problem too.
I'm Tom Bryden. I live at 402 Green Hill Circle. I've been a resident of Blowing Rock for over 10 years, but about 2 years ago, I guess, we bought the lot. Sort of a funny one would be, my wife said, "What is that big green tank over there?" Because when we bought it, it was summertime. So she was surprised. And I think she said, "Shane, can we put a lot of camouflage there?" I said, "I don't know, we'll have to talk to the town about that." Yeah, I totally support the fire, the emergency, the police. So that is, to me, the highest. And in 10 years, I didn't realize we were as much danger as I guess we were, because I've gone down the Glen Burnie Trail and almost had that issue. Anyway, I also spent 27 years at Accenture, which is a technology company. And I think I know there are technologies out there that would alleviate a lot of the issues that you're experiencing. They're expensive, Charlie, they are. But this town, I always kind of view it as an up and coming, we're gonna be here for a long time, right? I mean, hopefully hundreds of years. But we need to bring our technology up to speed. I think if you look at a study, and I would implore you guys to do the study and figure out a way to finance it. There's state funds, there's government funds. We need to figure out how to improve the technology and move away from VHF. I think that would be my request of the council, is to seriously consider the study so that we can really take what we have today and move it. And I applaud you, Shane, for what you guys have done, but I do think we're sort of reaching the end, and I think it's a real stopgap to add, 20 feet or whatever we're adding to this pole. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Nathan Miller.
My name's Nathan Miller. I live at 430 Old Eastridge Road, and it's Boone, but it's the last road in Boone, otherwise it'd be DPF. I do not live in Blowing Rock, but I represent a number of your neighbors, maybe your relatives, here, and they go by the acronym PROTECT, but Protect Blowing Rock Neighborhoods LLC. First, this community, which is the Green Hill community, is very focused on the importance of emergency communications. I mean, they live by a large man-made hazard. If that tank was to give way, I mean, that's 3 million gallons of water. It's washing a bunch of people off the mountain and coming down, probably ruining the golf course too. But it is it could be, I'm not saying it is a looming disaster, disaster, but it is something, and emergency services are on their mind at all times. And that's just for regular stuff too, regular police, regular fire, regular ambulance, all those things. I mean, and really utilities. I mean, they need water, sewer, everything else, and water and sewer employees need to be able to talk for the efficiency. But the problem we have here is, and the planning board recommended, is a study. I know your town manager, I like your town manager, but he's not an expert in telecommunications. I'm not an expert in telecommunications. When I do a court case, we seem to do a lot of construction cases right now. We have to get expert witnesses to come in to testify whether that was connected to the wall correctly, whether the flashing was done correctly. And you can't, as a layperson, just come testify about that. You have to have somebody with some knowledge, and it's knowledge more than a reasonable person. There are people out there, and there's firms out there. We've shared such as Cityscape. I know I've heard that somebody with the town of Blowing Rock called the county and asked them about their study. They're doing it with Motorola. There are plenty of services out there that could study this. We heard in the town's presentation a minute ago about Leaves dropping the UHF signals, or the VHF signals, excuse me. And that may be true. It may not be true. It may be something else causing it at that amount of time. We can study that. We could put a number on that. We saw pictures of the of your reservoir, and we saw there's a gauge there to show how much water's in there. Well, it's measuring it. That's something we can put a pin on and say, well, maybe we should do stage 1 water because we see we're running out of water. To say, well, the radio works here, it doesn't work there. I mean, in my opinion, communications have gotten worse here with Verizon and everybody else. But as to the VHF, you can study it, find out, and they can also determine where the best place for it is. Maybe this is the best place for us. Maybe it's out on the other side of town. I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows, and that's the problem. We need a study. I know we talk about an 80-foot tower, and I know if those poles can't be 80 foot, they got to be bigger than 80 foot because something's got to go on the ground. So they got to be bigger than 80 foot. And that town's application and the proposed ordinance says that they can put another 10 foot up there. So it's really a 90-foot tower. The tower itself may be 80 foot from the ground to the top, but when you add another 10-foot antenna on top, it's, for all essential purposes, it is a 90-foot tower. We appreciate the town. I would say the council, a lot of the council went over and beyond a normal public records request. We've made a number of public records requests, and we got different statements from different council members about no communications with cell towers. We are clearly worried about that. I respectfully disagree with Mr. Fox, and I assume Mr. Deal, about whether a cell phone tower can utilize that tower once you build it up there. And if a cell phone tower wants to do that, we're going to find out by a Superior Court judge because you're going to get sued. If they want to do it, they've got a bigger budget than y'all do, most of them. So they will test those limits. You may be right. We think you're wrong, but we're not placing the cell phone tower there, or the cell phone equipment, but that's a problem. But we have, most of the council members, there's one council member that did not give us that they hadn't been talking to, various cell phone companies. So that, because the town went out of its way to give us that and then to exclude one, it worries us a little bit that maybe somebody is. So that's an issue that we find. This conditional rezoning aspect, one, I don't know if the law will allow you to do this conditional rezoning. There's such things called spot zoning, and that is essentially what you're doing right here. You are picking one tiny little spot and you are zoning it. And you are zoning it, if you look at section 9 of what they say the conditional zoning permit, all other ordinances or portions thereof in conflict herewith are hereby repealed to the extent of such conflict. That means whatever's in this ordinance whether it violates the entire land use code that you and your predecessors as the town council members developed because it worked for the town. You're just throwing that to the wind as it applies to this ordinance. Now, it doesn't allow short-term rentals. It's not in this ordinance. Doesn't allow short-term rentals. Doesn't mean you can't do this somewhere else and do this conditional zoning and allow short-term rentals in that area. But that's a fight for another day. Y'all are picking this avenue to do this and throwing the judicial process to the whim. The judicial process and the quasi-judicial process is important because it allows people to have an orally presentation of evidence. It allows expert witnesses. It allows affected voices to be heard. Obviously, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the mayor not putting three minutes on me as the town of Boone would do. But it is.
We charge $500 a minute here.
Well, that's good. Send me that bill. But this is not the avenue to do it. You have an ordinance and you passed an ordinance. Maybe Commissioner Math or Councilman Matheson, you refer to yourself as commissioners in your ordinances and town council members is how I know you. You were probably around, but most everybody else has changed spots. But about 10 years ago, thereabouts, you passed the telecommunications ordinance, and you passed it. It applies to the town. And it applies to everybody else. Now, it doesn't if you do this because you're exempting yourself. And that ordinance has a lot of important things on it. One, you have to have an expert come in if you were to do a quasi-judicial and testify about why this tower, one, why it's needed. Two, what about the fall zone? I understand that we hadn't had this, one of these fall over recently that we know of, but supposedly these engineers will testify as to these cell phone towers, and this is not a cell phone tower as it's constructed, this is a utility pole. They fall in themselves. Now that's what the engineers are going to tell you. They will testify because I've done this in Banner Elk. They will sit up there and testify and tell you how it'll fall in on itself. We don't have any testimony that that's what this pole's going to do. So this pole, if it falls, is either going to fall down in the road, fall on somebody else's property, or fall and hit the water tank. And hopefully the water tank's thick enough. Shane told me how thick it was the other day, but I forget. But it sounds fairly thick. But you have that falling, and that's a hazard. Your ordinance deals with that hazard. But when you bypass that and you don't have any evidence from anybody as to why you should bypass that, you put that whole community in danger. And you put responding city services, whether it's EMS or water and sewer, in danger when they're having to operate around that pole when you don't know how it's going to fall. They all, when they do the cell towers, they all fence off that area and it has to fall within that area. Or they have to get a fall zone, and they have to pretty much get an easement that everybody's going to stay out of that fall zone. But notably, we don't have any of that there. We also, we're worried about topping the trees because you're an arbor city, and I get that. But you're also a city or town that attracts a lot of tourists, and one of your major things that you have here is Blue Ridge Parkway. It comes right to town almost. You have an ordinance that deals with whether you can see cell towers from Blue Ridge Parkway. Well, again, you're throwing that to the wind. It's an easy test. You can just float a balloon, but that wasn't done. So, and you don't have to do it if you pass this because you're just throwing away your ordinances. This is a neighborhood. It's been a neighborhood for a number of years. It was a neighborhood not before you own property, because where your road is, you own that. It appears before the plat was done. But after that plat, you didn't own those other lots, and they have deed restrictions on them. And I understand that y'all had a meeting, a closed session meeting to discuss different things with your lawyer. But this property, whether your deed does not show deed restrictions, but the deeds immediately previous to that do. And because of that, you are bound by those. And those require this to be a residential purpose. Your new shed violates that, your new concrete shed, and the cell tower or telecommunications tower will violate that. And that opens it up for every neighbor who shares that common development scheme to sue you. And it appears from your budget, I don't know why you did this, but you spent $92,000 last year on legal fees thereabouts, according to your budget. I think it was $97,227. And for whatever reason, your budget this year, you only adopted $30,000. You get in with a neighborhood lawsuit on restricted covenants, you're gonna spend that. And then if you get another one on the special use permit, I mean, that money's gone. So, and I'm not sitting up here trying to threaten you, I'm just telling you what they're prepared to do. I mean, they certainly don't want this, especially not without a study. And that's important. Some of the things, I mean, I did not know Chief Green. He died before I was born. I lived through and was the chairman of the county commissioners when William Mass was shot. It's heartbreaking. And it tears at your strings. It's awful, and it should never happen, and it does, and y'all put yourself out there every day, and we appreciate it. The issue here is in 1963, we don't know that there was a tower up there for communications. I mean, I hadn't heard any evidence of that. I will concede that you owned that property in 1962, is when you got where the water tower is now, and you own that little piece next to it previous to that. But there's no evidence of what the technology was, and technology has changed. We have the Viper system that the state and the county and everybody else is going to. I would imagine they're going to it because it works better. Again, I'm not an expert. That's why we would have somebody study. The county's doing their Viper study right now. The town could get in on that. So I think that we would appreciate, at the very least, we don't know what the rush is. The rush has not really been articulated. So we would ask, or Protect would ask, your neighbors on Green Hill would ask that do a study first. Then we can talk about it and have an open discussion. But do the study first to see what's really needed. And again, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Yes.
I have some questions, but I'll defer till we hear the rest of the public people speak.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Yes. Al Shackelford. Evening, sir.
My name is Al Shackelford. I live at 489 Country Club Drive in Blowing Rock. I retired, moved up here, been here for almost 15 years, full-time now for about 6. I retired, I was police chief in Atlanta, Georgia for 40 years, sheriff after that, so I have a little background in law enforcement. And I think everybody here is, that I've listened to before, is 100% for public safety. No question about that. And the only thing I can think of that comes to my mind is I'm looking around, and a lot of you all are like me, getting up there in the senior days, is medical assistance. And I was thinking, what else hasn't been covered or hasn't been mentioned was the ambulance service that comes from Boone or Caldwell County, whichever it comes. How important that is. And I think back when I started, I came out of the Army in 71 and went to the police department. Ambulances, per se, back then were station wagons or a van, something like that. They just took you, they picked you up and took you to the emergency room hospital. Now, that ambulance is an emergency room itself on wheels. And Blowing Rock has great firemen and EMT trained people. But you go in, first thing that happens, say you have a medical emergency, and they're going to take your vitals and put you in that ambulance. They're going to rip that shirt off and blouse off or whatever, hook you up to a lot of probes. And that information is going to be transmitted to a doctor in the emergency room by radio frequency. And those, what time it takes you to drive from here to Boone, 15 minutes, whatever it is, the traffic is, those are vital times. That EMT cannot give you the the shot or the medicine without a doctor's approval. And that doctor is reading that, what information is being transmitted by the ambulance itself. So an ambulance today is probably $175,000 because of that type of equipment that's in that system. So I just wanted to emphasize that. I had an emergency. My grandson called 911, or my daughter called 911 last night in Georgia, and nothing serious. Still, the ambulance came, transported him to emergency room, and but that type of equipment is so important. So I'm sitting here thinking about a tower, a pole that we needed immediately. I want that equipment now, and I think everybody in here supports that type of emergency equipment for police. I could go on and I could add to Captain Kirk there about all my 40 years and the times that I found myself without radio frequencies and been out on the road or on the interstate or whatever. But I just wanted to emphasize about how important radio frequencies are in this day and time with technology the way it is. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service. Bill Ballard. Bill. Bill Bullard?
You say Bill Bullard?
Yes. Sorry.
If you can't tell by now.
I'm sorry. I should have spoke up. Well, my wife says I can't hear either, so.
I think all the men in this room have heard that. My name is Bill Bullard. I reside at 164 West Green Hill Drive. And if I'm appalled at any one thing, I'm a newcomer. I've only been here about 5 years, but it's home. That tower, if that be what's needed to solve our problems, is the ugliest darn thing I've ever seen. 40 years ago, they put the first one up in the Research Triangle Park, and it looks like these beautiful Carolina pine trees we have. So if the tower is it, from those that are concerned about appearance, that should be considered, regardless of the cost. Trying not to be redundant from the town council meeting, but 50-year-old problem, and we're still looking at it from ground up. Hearsay is in the investment world, a lot of these towers will become obsolete in the next 3 to 5 years. Why? Because of the enhancements and improvements in satellite communications. But I don't think this community wants to wait 3 to 5 years. But what if the trees keep growing taller? We're going to have a bigger tower? So I reckon what I'm trying to plant here is some seeds that maybe have not been considered, but the issue should be resolved. It's a lot of the people, including yourselves, have dealt with this long enough. So I say make a decision and let the trees fall where they may, but consider something that's pleasant to the eye. We all live in a beautiful community, and there is no enhancement to that tower from what I saw pictures of tonight. I still believe that we should be thinking 10, 15, 20 years down the road, which the current communication system appears to be obsolete. Is that a fair statement? I think from what I heard tonight, it is. And that young man sitting back there, something happens to one of his officers, he has to live with that. The policemen are out there on their own. The fire department has a team, paramedics have a team. So if there's not a solution to this problem in the immediate future, I suggest that no policeman go into these uncommunicable areas without a second person. I'm just looking for some immediate solutions to that problem. And it's not acceptable to say the town can't afford it, in my opinion. But there needs to be more protection for these guys and gals, because they're on their own. Some of you have probably said enough. Probably time for me to sit down. But I hope I planted a new seed. That was my goal. Thank you for what you guys and gals do. I'm 80 years old, and I don't want to be hearing about this 10, whatever years I got left from the good Lord. So let's fix this thing. I say that to both sides. Be done with it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time, Mr. Bullard, as well as the others. Okay, Jason McDaniel. Good evening, Mr. McDaniel.
Good evening. My name is Jason McDaniel. I live at 574 Green Hill Circle, and if the pole falls, it's going to run down the road and hit my house, but that's beside the point. I don't think anybody here objects to the new communications tower. And we're dancing around, the rumor is that the change in zoning will allow a cell phone company to put their equipment on top of it, and there are people who are talking to a cell phone tower company about that. So I think if we could have some legal between your attorney and our attorney that this changing the zoning will not allow that, I think everybody would be happy. And, it just, I think everything else is kind of secondary. The other thing, have we looked at other high sites specifically? Have we looked at that high radio tower opposite Tweetsy? Because I know who owns that, and he'd probably be happy to talk to you about putting your stuff up there if it would work. I also think we really ought to consider trimming the trees and see if they're the problem, or having an expert tell us if they're the problem. And lastly, for Bill, I've seen that tree in the Research Triangle. It unfortunately is 50 feet higher than everything else, and it looks like a California redwood.
I don't know what that looks like, sir.
All right, Janie Sellers. Put Ms. Sellers in a safety mode. We are not related, okay?
You had me worried when we were talking about your relatives earlier. No, my name is Janie Sellers. My address is 412 Wonderland Drive, Blowing Rock. I'm the vice chair of the Blowing Rock Civic Association, and I'm here tonight to offer some comments on behalf of our executive committee on the Green Hill rezoning proposal. We have been very interested in this proposal ever since the 2023 winter retreat, which I think is the first time it was discussed with public anyway. Our mission includes protecting neighborhoods, and we know that this development would raise issues for the neighborhood. Having said that, even after all this time, we really haven't seen enough specific information about the town's communication needs and the options for meeting them to develop a position. What we can advocate for is an interactive and transparent discussion and decision process. When the planning board considered the proposed rezoning, significant concerns about safety and other negative impacts of the new tower were expressed by Green Hill neighborhood residents. I'm sure you've heard more about them tonight, and we urge you to respect the concerns of those neighbors. As a result of what they heard, the planning board added an additional condition that the town conduct a study to explore viability of and potential alternatives to the current proposal for locating the communications equipment. Because we believe that data-driven decisions are good governance, BRCA supports the approach taken by the Planning Board and encourages the council to adopt it, along with any other modifications to the rezoning conditions that the council determines are appropriate after completing your work. We also encourage you to delay action on the current proposal to give the town staff time to provide you with further information about what a study would involve, to allow for discussions with the Green Hill neighborhood residents about communications that would mitigate possible adverse effects of the new tower, if the study indicates that Green Hill is in fact the most viable location. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Sellers. Bill Carter. Hey, Bill. Just state your name, Bill, and your address, if you will.
Mr. Mayor, distinguished members of council, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bill Carter. I live at 401 Terry Acres Circle. I've had a home here in Blowing Rock for 40 years, 42, and I have claimed this as my residence for the last 30 years. I'm troubled by the rush to extend the town's communication tower on Green Hill Circle, so I want to share with you a few of my findings on the issue. I will be brief. In my research on communication towers in a residential setting, there is a new form of environmental pollution, RFR, or radio frequency radiation poisoning. RFR poisoning is documented to increase the risk of cancer, particularly brain cancer. It was found in 2 reputable studies on early cancerous tumor development from environmental RFR pollution. The studies found concrete risk of early malignant heart tumors in lab animals when exposure to continuous RFR. The communication tower on Green Hill Circle is unquestionably emitting radio frequency radiation. The result of these studies do not rule out potential serious harm to human health. I had my first cousin who I grew up with. We were 9 months apart in age, and we went to elementary school together. We went to junior high school together. We went to college together. We roomed together after college in Charlotte. He was a nuclear electrical engineer. He's dead, and he died from radiation poisoning. And so this is what prompted my looking at that. The communication tower, when extended to its new proposed height, will forever visibly change the vistas of Blowing Rock for miles around. It will be seen by visitors, travelers, and residents alike, changing the beautiful views we and others now enjoy. I have discovered when a communication tower is visible, I'm also a commercial real estate certified expert. I have been an expert witness in several Superior Court cases in real estate devaluation. I am currently on call for a case in Charlotte right now for real estate devaluation in a Superior Court case if and when it goes to trial, and it may very shortly. So anyway, I have discovered when a communication tower is visible to a residential property, the effect will have up to a 20 to 40% decrease in appraised value. In one poll I found of people actively looking to buy a home, it was noted that 94% said they would not consider the purchase of a home where a communication tower was visible. Remember, 94% said no, they would not buy a home where a communication tower was visible. The range of RFR from a communication tower is found to be about 1/4 mile. I looked on Google Earth and found a large accumulation of houses in that radius up on Green Hill Circle. All the homes in that perimeter could, in my opinion, have an estimated value of over $100 million. This could result in a reduction in owner equity of at least $200 million in lost value because of the visibility and possible RFR pollution of the communication tower. I also think an argument could be made to call for a reduction in the tax value of these houses by at least a minimum of 20% devaluation, possibly more, resulting in a very significant reduction in tax revenue to the town of Blowing Rock and Watauga County. I can't imagine the homeowners sitting by quietly and potentially losing 20% of their home's value attributed to a new visible communication tower. I wouldn't. I found proof and evidence in my research that typically communication towers should not be located, and I repeat, should not be located in or near a residential setting, but in a commercial or industrial location or an isolated place away from people. I personally think the subject tower should be relocated. In conclusion, I'd like to say I found a number of convincing arguments on the problems of this issue of radio frequency poisoning. There is a clear call for more study and evaluation of the effects of RFR poisoning, which is a newly, and I want to point that out, designated environmental pollutant. In my opinion, this is a real bad genie in a bottle that, if uncorked, will, in all likelihood, be a noted pollutant and hazard to our health. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you. Ms. Lynn Buxton.
My name is Lynn Buxton. I live at 110 Blackberry Lane, and I'm 2 homes away from the tower, proposed tower, the one that's there currently. The other day I decided, even though I walk the circle all the time, that I was going to walk up to where the tower is going, the current tower is. And I noticed Shane pointed out in both of his presentations at the planning board about being kind to the neighborhood in terms of aesthetics and the trees. Well, when I look out my kitchen window, I see only the tank. I don't see but the tops of the trees that are above the tank. And so the tank is very visible to me. I don't see any reason that we can't replant arborvitaes or trees that actually cover the tank, because like you said, the trees are all above the tank now. I'm a very practical person, and I think it's time. We just lost a tree in our front yard that was, I don't know how many, 150 years old or whatever, but how many years do we have an arborist that's looked at these trees and tried to evaluate whether or not they're going to live any longer? And we worry about trimming them. If we trim them, they're going to be ugly because there's not going to be any green left. So it seems to me it's more practical to think about taking some of these trees down, the majority of the trees, particularly the ones that are causing the problem on that side. That would cost, I don't know what it costs for us to take a tree down, a couple $1,000s. It makes no sense to me that you're going to do all of this when the trees are just going to grow more, we're going to see the tower more, and it changes nothing. So the other thing I want to follow up on is this radio frequency. I lost a husband to a glioblastoma, brain cancer, in 2015. And we have had one other death on our street for a glioblastoma. And we have another brain cancer on our street at this moment. So if you don't think that's a cluster, I'm not a physician, but that's 3 on Green Hill Circle.
Thank you, Ms. Buxton. And Dan Page. Dan, did you want to?
I pass.
You pass? Okay. Well, thank you for considering it. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay. My thanks to all of you that have. It's important.
I'd like to hear Mr. Miller come up. I had some questions I wanted to ask him.
Okay, Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Yes, sir.
I have some questions about the LLC. Can you tell us how many people in that general area are part of the LLC?
I cannot. I know at the planning board, we talked about how many members there were. In all honesty, I don't remember how many they said 10 or 20, I believe. I know you were here too, so you might have heard that as well, but no, I don't know the individual members off the top of my head.
I'll be very honest with you, Pete, it doesn't make any difference.
Pardon me?
It doesn't make any difference who the members are.
Well, my next question was going to be, how many of those people are registered voters?
If I don't know their names, I can't tell you, I can't look them up to tell you whether they're registered voters or not.
Okay, Pete. Unless it's pertaining to the poll directly, let's stand down.
Well, I'll pursue it later.
Okay. Thank you, Pete.
Mr. Miller, can I ask a question? while
Yes,
you're up
sir.
there? I just wanted to clarify that you, did I understand you to say that it was your recommendation or Protect's recommendation that we should pursue a Viper Tower in lieu of what we're doing?
I don't know about a Viper Tower. I know the county pursued a Viper Tower there and it didn't happen. And then they put a Viper Tower to cover this area because the county still has to cover this area. It's the county ambulance service. I know y'all have had various discussions about the ambulance here, but it is the county ambulance service. They use the county communications. It is I don't know about your fire department per se, but you've got the county sheriff also patrols this area. And so their Viper system, and the highway patrol, of course, patrols this area. So their Viper system covers this area. I can't tell you the coverage of it. I did not say or mean to say, if I did say, that we're looking to put a Viper Tower there. I will tell you that the town has run Viper fiber or fiber that can operate Viper. We saw that in the latest public records request, at least to the new concrete building you got. But no, I mean, right now, Protect's opinion is, and request is that you study it and do and study what works.
Are you aware that we looked at a Viper Tower for that location?
I can't tell you that I'm aware of that because in our public records request, we got no information in regards to that. So my response would be, if you did and there's documents and it wasn't turned over, then there's a problem. But if y'all just talked about it and there's no documents about it, then that would be okay. But I wouldn't be aware of that.
Okay. No, I wasn't on town council at that time, but I know that there was some conversation about that and didn't know if Protect or yourself were aware of it.
Well, I'm aware, if we're talking about the thing 10 years ago.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I am aware of that, and I am aware of what that council promised this neighborhood by doing the telecommunications ordinance and promising that they wouldn't do exactly what the town staff is proposing to do right now. I am aware of that. As to the specifics of talking about Viper and upgrading to Viper, I can tell you that 10 years ago, Viper was creeping up here, and since we're in the hinterlands, we're the last to get anything from the state in regards to anything.
Well, now, may I?
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Were you not chairman of the county commissioners then?
I was chairman from 10 to 14, so I would be at the end of that 10-year period.
And the county commissioners were in total support of the Viper Tower being located on Green Hill. I was not on council, I was not mayor. They were in total support of it being located there because of public safety. And it was paid for in full by the state, okay? The council and the mayor at that time listened to the citizens and decided that the Viper Tower would not be suitable at that location. Am I not correct? Isn't that what came out?
I have zero memory of discussing a Viper Tower in 2014. I'm not saying that it didn't happen.
Okay,
The news articles would be there, but
it doesn't.
I don't.
A Viper Tower is a lot larger than.
I agree. It's a lot larger. It's a different technology.
Exactly.
I mean, I certainly understand all that.
Okay. Any other? Yes,
Mr.
Melissa.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If the council voted tonight to do the study, and the study came back, and it proved that that was the best location for whatever technology was chosen, is Protect going to back the choice to put it there?
It's a fair question that I don't have the answer to because I haven't discussed that with my client. We have talked about getting the study ourselves, but we have not done that yet because of cost, and we're seeing where we needed to do it and seeing what the town's gonna do. But I can't answer that, sorry.
Okay, no, that's fair.
Any other questions for Mr. Miller?
No,
Okay.
but I can assure him, he and I were both there in 2014.
I know that.
I
I know
remember
that.
Consolidated Dispatch with Blowing Rock. That part I remember, but
That's
again, not saying that it didn't happen, but.
That's what they call water over the dam. Of course, we need some of that water going over our dam. But thank you,
I don't
Mr.
know
Miller.
you want it going over your dam.
The water. Well, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Do I? We have a second. And Kat, you okay with that? David?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
And Pete?
Aye.
Okay. Public hearing is now closed. Council, do you have additional questions for Shane? No? All right, here's my take on it, being in
I
a,
got a question for you.
yes, go ahead.
I've been trying to look at a few things that we talked about.
Speak up a
earlier.
little bit, Doug, if you would.
I've been trying to look at a few things that you had mentioned earlier. Can you tell everybody how much a penny is worth now and give us an estimate of what it would cost to go to a network conversion per year right now?
So a penny on our current tax rate,
Right.
at the current rate, about $175,000 annually is a penny. And the second question was for a conversion to a more sophisticated system. Is that what you're asking? Like
Correct.
Viper 800 megahertz digital system. You know, again, I answered earlier, I think it's fair to say the radios themselves, I have a better feel for. Those are about $8,000 to $10,000 a piece. And we have about 75 of them. Not all of them would have to be replaced, but the majority of them would. So $500,000, I think, is fair for the radios, if not a little bit more. The infrastructure itself, you know, putting in the technology, putting in the system, I would double or triple that. So somewhere between 1 and 2 million would be my best guess to go full digital, to go to a full Viper system.
Don't you think that's something that the town should be looking at for the near future? I mean, what do you think to move forward from?
I would agree. So I would agree that the last time this was brought up, that was mentioned a few moments ago, having and being able to utilize state resources to have the tower here, or wherever the tower could have been located. At this time, that former council chose not to move forward with it. Would have put us obviously a decade ahead of where we are right now. Fiber is being utilized versus what was being proposed at that time. You still have to have the ability to have a level of point-to-point from radio towers to radio towers. Essentially, you can have fiber as a backhaul. That is something that has changed in the last 10 years. The cost has continued to rise, though. So I think that that's absolutely something that we need to consider and put a plan in place of how we can obtain that. But yeah, my best guess would be financing something like that or putting something like that in front of the financing. We simply don't have the cash to put $1 or $2 million towards something like that. Would cost us a few pennies on the dollar for potential debt service. But I absolutely think that's something that is our ultimate goal to get to, is having a more sophisticated system.
Pete, any questions for Shane?
No.
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
In thinking about a study, I'm sure there are different levels of studies that show different things, from you know, just what our state of communication is right now with what we have, what it might be with 23 more feet added, all the way to looking at all of the geographic imagery to see other locations where it could be. If we were to do, let's say, just a phase one of a study to see exactly what 80 feet would give us now, do we know how much that would cost? And then if we also did a study that was like 100% comprehensive, that showed every viable option where, I think we have information that we have an estimate as to how much that would cost.
Studies vary based on the scope. So I think that's a fair question to ask. You know, propagation studies to more comprehensive, all the way to what would it take to get to a digital system. Various options in there. So I think that's for discussion. I think that's up for discussion tonight of what we're asking here, and for staff to do some research into what the cost would be of that. So.
Good?
Question.
Yes, sir.
Shane, assuming that our VHS system was working at peak capacity, the current system we have, is VHF technology adequate for our needs?
It is. So VHF technology is still being utilized even when you have Viper systems. So when Chief Kirk talked about a dual band radio is the ability to have both essentially analog and digital, or have two different bands. So you have a lower frequency option with a VHF and a higher frequency option with a Viper, with something that's UHF related. So the VHF technology is still being utilized all across the country. It's not gone away. What's starting to replace it in areas from the primary source is the digital or the Viper system. Viper's a North Carolina terminology, but we're talking UHF. We're talking that digital 800 megahertz type option. Where you do have those into place, it allows for things like other communications, or communication takes place with other agencies. And so you can communicate, and Chief Kirk can speak to that in a little more detail. You can communicate with the town of Boone, you can communicate with Watauga County, you can communicate across agencies of whoever's on the system. So our VHF system is just for Blowing Rock. So as you come into Blowing Rock, you can utilize the system, but outside of Blowing Rock, that system is not utilized. And so the biggest advantage, I would say, and again, I looked over Chief, from a digital system would be the ability to communicate with other agencies and have a common network that's out there. The VHF technology that we're utilizing currently is still very viable. It's still a very viable system. You know, I don't know what the future holds and what that may look like, but absolutely, what we're using it for today is still a very viable system.
In your experience, do we have many mission-critical issues that can be solved with $13,000 or less?
I do believe that it can improve the overall coverage and ability for us to communicate.
I guess what I'm saying, $13,000 solution doesn't come our way very often.
Right.
It's usually much more expensive.
And I would agree. So part of this job is balancing the budget, right? Trying to determine what's best, what needs to be put forth. And so the current technology that we have in place is here. We've had it. We don't have to spend additional monies to replace it. A new system would be a very costly system for us to replace.
Thank you.
Shane, at the planning board, the recommendation was to move it to us, but to do a study. I know it's been a short time since the planning board, but has the staff done any research on what a cost of a study would be?
We have. I mean, we've looked at various levels, and so it's depending on the scope of what we're asking. So it's everything from a few $1,000s to a more comprehensive study would be in the $30,000 to $50,000 range.
All right, council. Here's my take on it. You have a few options. One, you table it. Two, you approve it as presented. Three, you approve it as presented with the condition of no private parties are able to utilize the tower. Three, you remove trees. Four, or five, you approve the study, or you approve it pending a study to be, or table it pending a study to be performed and to be reheard at whatever time the study is complete. What do you think? Any thoughts? Would anybody like to make a motion?
Well, study as a word can mean so many different things, as we just talked about.
But if you do a comprehensive study, you're looking at probably 6 to 8 months or a year. Okay? So what you can do is look at a preliminary study. And that study will tell us and the citizens, yes, you need to maybe expand more and take it further. I don't know.
Mayor, could we get some clarity on exactly what study the planning board recommended to us?
There wasn't any clarity. They just recommended a study. Period. Yeah, they just said study, a study.
And I would refer, I even look at our council to see if Mr. Deal would have anything to add to that. It was somewhat vague about the study that was recommended, without giving a true scope or parameters of what that would look like.
I think that's an aspect for discussion among yourselves. One of the things that you're authorized to do upon this public hearing, as the mayor has mentioned, you can approve it, you can do many different things. You can refer to a committee or to administrative staff for further study. So I think the scope of that study is something that's within your direction to staff. And you could take an incremental approach, or you could go shorter or larger. That's kind of a non-answer. I don't think we have much clarity from the planning board itself other than to perform some form of study. And I would think the implication is to demonstrate whether this is needed or not.
No, the public hearing, I understand,
may I, for the record, lodge an objection, and that's it. I understand the public hearing is closed, and that's why I'm lodging this objection. Mr. Fox represents the town in this application, and Mr. Fox, after the public hearing has been concluded, is still presenting evidence. And I would contend and lodge an objection that is improper. I understand that he's also the town manager, and that puts the council in a weird position, but I didn't create that mess. I'm just pointing out, lodging my objection.
I don't understand.
I'm a little bit older than you. I'm still learning. Okay? I appreciate that, but,
So can I put the town manager hat on and recommend that
Yes.
if a study is recommended, then whom we contract with, what that scope looks like is not necessarily to be able to be answered tonight. I mean, that's a conversation, we have a lot of details there to work out. So I would just add that from my perspective. You're going to, again, my town manager hat, not applicant necessarily right now, you're going to instruct staff to look at a study, look at a scope, look at all that stuff. There's a little bit more to that than can be maybe flushed out completely, right? So scope-wise, we can hear comments tonight about that can help direct that scope of what that looks like, but that would be my offering to
And to
that.
clarify, you can direct staff to provide alternative study options to you to follow. So I think you have a lot of different opportunities in front of you.
Council, what would you like to do? Pete?
So I think the study, first phase, is a good idea. But I've said this before, just remember, every day that we don't have accurate communications and there's a problem, that's going to come back to the town and be a problem.
So, council, how would you like to move forward? Somebody needs to make a motion to do something. Okay?
I'll make a motion.
Okay?
I'll make a motion that we table it for this meeting and go forward with a stage 1 study.
Allowing town staff to handle that.
I mean, is that
Can you
it?
clarify what a stage 1 study is?
Well, that would be like not a full I don't know. This is where it's all confusing because, you know, Tucker says that we can talk about what kind of study and how much to do, but I feel like if we do a study just to see, will the 80-foot pole, you know, solve the problem? Maybe it won't. I mean, they could come back and say, you need 135 foot.
So the study would be based on what we currently have compared to what potentially 80-foot pole would provide.
Do we have a second on that motion?
And when you say you're turning it over to town staff, you're giving town staff permission to find a company to do this?
Yes.
And contract.
Yes. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Pete seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, Kat?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
Doug?
I'd like to, I meant to say this thing, I want to make one quick comment.
Okay.
And then I'll give you my decision. And this has to go with something that was said, alluded to in the planning board meeting. And I just wanted to assure everyone that I, as the former fire chief or the current fire chief, will not profit in any way. This was alluded to, and so I just wanted to get that out. That our biggest concern and the benefits that we have coming out of this would be for the structural safety and life safety of the citizens of Blowing Rock. And in saying that,
Aye. Okay. Pete?
Aye.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been tabled for this evening to be heard at a later date at such time when town staff can hire independent research company to determine whether 50 feet, 80 feet, 1,000-foot pole, or whatever. And they can come back with their recommendations to the town staff, and then thus the town staff can bring it to council. So that's where that stands this evening. I would like to thank everyone for attending. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.